Alright, so lab 5, loops and strings. So we're asked to design a program that can be solved using while loops or for loops, or both, and string operations. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the key details of the problem. So we're supposed to be using while loops, for loops, or both, and string operations. Your program will process a long string with a fixed structure. Again, that's a big giveaway right there, a fixed structure, whose parts are separated using specific characters. So again, separated using specific characters. The string will contain at least 5 objects of the same kind and use a structure to describe the objects. So we have structure to the layout. Okay. And now we get into the output that you should have towards the end of your program. So the program will search through the string and perform at least 2 types of operations. One about string operations, such as searching for something or encrypting a text, and one about performing mathematical computations, such as finding the average, total, or largest value. Your problem should reflect a real-world operation. Okay, so let's take a look at the example provided below. And so we have this string, John Smith, comma 31, comma manager, comma 55K, and then semicolon, and then Alex Hoover, and so on and so on. Now, earlier we said that our string was going to have a fixed structure and it was going to be separated using specific characters. So if we look at our string over here, we can obviously see that is the case, right? So we have commas here, commas there, and finally at the end of this record we have a semicolon. And the same over here, full name, age, occupation, and salary. So we're asked to find if there's an employee named Alex Hoover. If so, display all the information. And then task 2 is to find the average salary of all employees. Now, if we refer back to our hints from the problem, we were supposed to use either while loops or for loops and string operations. So one thing that I like to do when I want to know what's available to me is I like to look into the documentation for, in our case, string operations. So what I like to do is just open up a new tab and search up Python string methods. And I usually like to use W3 schools. So if you look over here, we'll have a lot of the methods that are available to us, actually all of them, and a description of what each one does. So capitalize, and as we expect, it converts the first character of a string to uppercase. All right. So if we look back to our problem, we're told that we have a fixed structure and it's separated using specific characters. Also, I forgot to mention one last key detail in solving the problem. You must adhere to the third requirement, so you cannot hard code any indices. You must use a function or a method to retrieve the index of a semicolon. So that's one big hint that we can use here as well. So if we go back over here, gee, I wonder if there's a method here that would help us find the index of either a semicolon or a colon. And so, yeah, if we look over here, we have a find method. And if we look at the description, it searches the string for a specific value and returns the position where it was found. Now, I think this is a very good hint. Another reason why I like this website is if you click on this link over here, it will show you a lot of examples as to how to use any given method and also the syntax for which you call it. So you know that you can pass a value to search for, a start, and that start over here represents where to start the search. The default is 0, so the beginning of the string, and the end, an optional value where you define where to stop looking inside the string. All right, so let's take a look at one of these examples over here. And you do have to have a little background in string slicing. So if you haven't taken a look at this week's material, please take a look at loops.py and string.py. Specifically, the professor's example over here and over here, and really try and understand what string slicing is and how it works. There's a lot of good content on YouTube, but I find that this document in itself is more than enough to solve this lab. Okay, so if we go back over here and we try it, so we see that we have this text variable, which is a string containing hello, welcome to my world, and x in this case is the index where it finds this word welcome. So if we look back over here, finds the first occurrence of the specified value. So let's verify this. So notice that indexing always starts at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So W starts at 7. And fair enough, we do get 7 as a return value over here. Now, I don't like that they used X over here. It's not very descriptive. Let's say start index. And let's replace that over here as well. And we get the same output over here. Now, hypothetically, what if I was to search for this O right here? So we'd start at indexes 0 over here. So 0, 1, 2, 3, then 4. So we should expect a value of 4 when we call it for the start index. So let's go ahead and test our hypothesis here. And not a 0, I meant O. Let's run that. And sure enough, we get the index 4. Now, let's translate this back to our problem over here. So hypothetically, we have this fixed structure over here, and now we have a mechanism in which we can search for something inside this fixed structure. So if we take a little peek at the postings for this week, specifically strings.py, the examples over here where she shows you what is going on with certain slice calls over here. So everything up to the 6th index, the 7th index to the end, and so on and so forth. So let's use this theory and let's test this out on our input string, this right here. So I already have something set up right here. This is our string text, and we're gonna call .find. So start index is equal to my string dot, and I know that I have find available to me. Now, what is the second argument that we have to pass into .find? It is the string that we're looking for inside of our string. So in this case, it was welcome. In this example that I showed over here, it was O, but it could be hypothetically anything inside the string. And really, what happens if it doesn't find it? Well, it tells us over here that if it doesn't find it, it returns -1 as the value. And if we think about that, that makes sense because you can never have a negative index since indexing starts at 0 and all the way up. So if we get like -1, we know for a fact that we did not find it. And that's why they chose to use the value -1. So in our case over here, I want you to give me the index of, let's say this colon right here. And so let me now use slicing. And the idea of slicing is that you have this ability to specify somewhere to start with in a string. So example str is equal to hi there. And so hypothetically, what if I wanted to go from there all the way to the end? Well, we know that slicing starts from index 0, right? So this would be index 0 over here. And then this would be 1 for that one. And then this would be 2 for that space, and then 3 for that T that we want. But then if we go on, 4 for that H, 5 for the E, 6 for the R, and 7 for the other E. And if we look at the professor's example over here, how you do a slice is you specify that string variable, and you specify a start index and a stop index. Again, I highly encourage that you go in and you try to run some of these examples and read through the professor's explanation. And so if we go back over here, I want to grab there. So I know that it starts from index 3 over here, and it goes on to index 7. So their word is what I'm going to call it, is equal to my example string, and we use that bracket notation, and we specify where we want to start, so 3 all the way to 7. Now, one thing you do want to keep in mind is that string slicing is exclusive at the end. So what that means is it goes up to that end index that you specified, so this value, but it doesn't grab the item at that value. And we'll see what I'm talking about when I print this variable, their word. And so if we run this, now I want you to run main. I do not want you to run main. Control C. I should have probably put main somewhere else. Give me 1 second. Okay, I am back, and if we run this, so notice it started from 3, so there, but like I said, it went up to 7, so up to E, but not including 7, hence we don't have that last E. So if you want to include it to the end, then you would have to make it 8. So you're saying go up to 8, but don't include what's at index 8. Therefore, we have there. Okay. And so how could we translate that to this problem? Well, what we're saying here is that Python gives us this function or this method over here called .find, and you give it an argument to look for inside a string, this txt. So I'm going to leave that to you to use slicing and this over here to segment this string into regions that you would care about. Hence, maybe this region over here. And after you're done with that, then this region over here, and then this region over here. All right. I know that sounds very challenging, but really think about what you have available to you and try your best to do that. And think about how you can manipulate your data structures, in this case a string, and think about what data types you're dealing with as you do this. And I highly recommend that you also take a look at the professor's loop.py example. All right. So yeah, essentially you're going to use that approach to try and solve task 1 and task 2. So task 2, find the average salary of all employees. So you'd be looking for these values inside the string. And then task 1, if there's an employee named Alex Hoover, if so, display all the information. So Alex Hoover's information is simply this right here. Okay, best of lucks, and you got this. Also, one last thing that I do want to cover. I know a lot of people had trouble understanding the concept of the utility file, and they really just didn't see the value or the reason why you even had to have like a utility file. If that is the case, stick around for a couple minutes. I'll explain that real quick. If not, you're free to leave, and yeah, have fun. Okay, so a utility file. The idea is that we've seen before that we can define some function, def foo, and print hi there. this is a very trivial function. It does absolutely nothing, right? It just prints hi there. It doesn't even return something. So let's just return 1. So it gives us a value or something when we call it, right? But hypothetically, let's say I had 20 of these functions. Now, I have all these foos. I'll call this one foo1, foo2, foo3, foo4, foo5, foo6, foo7, right? And so now I have all these function definitions in my main file. And as this gets larger and larger, imagine we had like 30, 40, 50 of these function definitions. It gets really hard to see what your main.py is doing, right? And so we have this mechanism in Python where you can define all of your function definitions inside some other file, call it utility.py, and you can import those into your main and use them in your main without having to waste a lot of space here. And so what that looks like, and this is very valid code, right? This runs normally if I call any one of these foos, right? So val is equal to foo, and we run that and we print val, right? And we get there and we get the value 1. Notice that it returns 1, but it prints hi. So utility files now will make your life a lot easier by letting you have all of these function definitions inside some other file, and you give that file a meaningful name to like essentially group functions that do similar tasks, right? And so if we were to create a new file here and we call it utility.py, and I were to go back to main and I would cut all of these functions that I made here. So foo does not exist here anymore, and I just chuck them inside utility.py. And now what I would have to do is at the very top of my main file, I would have to say, hey, import that file name. So utility. Okay, cool. And so the idea here is now instead of calling foo, what you're going to say is utility.foo, and this would run. So go to this utility file and call the foo function. And if we run this, this still runs. Now, one common thing that a lot of people do make a mistake here is that they start defining inputs inside their utility file. And what you'll notice is that when it runs this import statement over here, it's going to also run your code inside utility. So it's bringing these definitions over here, but if you had like an input or something over here, user input is equal to input, give me a value. Now, if I'm asking for this input inside what's called utility.py, I could print inside utility value of input is, and on the next line I print user input, and then at the very end of this file, just to make it very clear, I'm gonna also print end of utility file. So we can really see what's going on when we call this import statement over here in Python. Now, what most people would expect is, hey, you run this code over here, and then I'll ask for your input when you start using the utility file over here. That is not the case. As soon as you call import, it's going to run all of your code inside that utility.py. So please do not take any input over here. In your utility.py, you should be just defining functions and later using those functions in main. Essentially, all it does is it lets you group your functions in another file and make your main file look very clean. And so if we run this, we will see that very first statement to run is give me a value, hence that user input that we were taking at the very top of utility.py. And we'll say 420. Why not? Okay, so give me a value. Inside utility, the value of input is 420. End of utility file. So it did everything inside my utility file before it even started doing any of the code inside my main file. So again, do not ask for input inside your utility file. Make sure you're doing all of the input and your work inside main, and just keep your utility file just to like host or keep your functions inside there. Okay, and that's essentially what utility files are. Now, there's a lot of syntaxes for importing those. It really doesn't matter. You can just like do a quick Google search of Python import statement, and again go to W3 Schools, and it'll show you the various ways to use imports, and you can try it yourself in there as well. All right, take care, best of lucks.